everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. You might notice a slightly different voice at the end of this podcast, and that is because I have taken over from Caitlin today, and we're here to talk about placements. I'm very kindly joined by Em Sowden, and I'm going to hand over to her to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about what she does at the university.
Well, thank you very much, Sadie. So, yes, I'm Em, and I am the Placement and Development Manager for Careers, based in the Careers Department in the Carrington building. And I look after all placements within the curriculum, and I also manage the teams who support students to secure their placements and help them obtain their placements, whatever size and length of placement they're doing as part of their degree.
So you really see a variety of different students doing different things at the university.
We absolutely do. So there's a range of placements. I think we're probably the most flexible offerer of placements within the curriculum.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've got placements at the university which are actually a mandatory part of your course. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing speech and language therapy or education or pharmacy and clinical practices in other areas such as psychology, mm-hmm. you would have to do a placement because your placement would be a regulated part of your degree and you couldn't complete your degree. Yeah, absolutely. But for the rest of the placement opportunities, they're really optional. So if you're coming into university on a 3-year degree, there are lots of placement options within your course that you could choose in years 1, 2 or 3 or a variety of years, or you might come in on a 4-year degree with a placement year, and we're really flexible about students transferring on and off and choosing what's right for them.
Yeah, because ultimately it's hard to know when you sign up to that 3-year degree or 4-year degree if that's really what you want to do. If you think about what you might want to do in the future, what you thought in first year versus your final year, that inevitably is likely to change.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, so I have some students on my course that started off with like 3-year courses and decided to change. By the way, I study consumer behaviour and marketing, and I'm a final year student, if you didn't know that already, which you probably didn't. So I thought to start off with, we would go back to basics and basically just further on to what you just said.
Yeah.
So just to start off, for anyone who doesn't know but has just clicked on this podcast because they're a bit intrigued, what is a placement?
Oh, so a placement is a part of experiential learning, really, that you would do as part of your degree. You're going to contextualise your learning in the workplace with a placement provider for a period of time where you're going to be kind of learning different things and developing professionally, personally, and really enhancing kind of your career aspirations and ambitions. And you might be putting a lot of the things that you've learned at university into practice, as well as learning new things. That's essentially what a placement is.
Okay, that's interesting to know. And another question, you hear a lot about placements. I know when I first started looking, there was a lot about placements and then the word internship.
Yeah.
What would you say is the difference between the two?
Oh, yeah. So, lots of people use those words interchangeably. And so do placement providers and employers too.
Okay.
So I think it's all things to everyone. But at the University of Reading, we define a placement as being something that's in the curriculum and part of your course, and an internship as being something that you would do extracurricularly. So that could be a summer internship or a short internship that you might do in your own time, maybe during Easter or another vacation period. So that's the definition that we provide at Reading, really, to help get your head around it.
Okay, and on the topic of internships, if you're on a 3-year course, which naturally wouldn't necessarily blend to a placement, but you think, you're hearing a lot about internships and you're wondering if it's beneficial for you, how important is it for that student to look into internships? Or
yeah, it's vital. I think it's so important because getting experience during your degree, wherever you do it, it doesn't matter if it's part of the curriculum or outside of it, really the value that it brings to you as an individual is equal. And I think internships, we run schemes at the university university to support students, but of course you can find an internship yourself outside of the university. We've got some really flexible schemes. We've got the Reading Internship Scheme that offers opportunities that are paid throughout the academic year now, not just limited to the summer.
Oh, that's great.
Which is really great.
It's really handy.
Because of course employers want interns all year through.
Yeah.
They don't want to just wait until you're free in the summer.
In terms of like, would it be down to the student to know whether they can manage their workload and this internship?
Yeah, so we've got a little rule at the university, and actually this falls in line with regulations and monitoring around your rights to work, especially if you're an international student. And what we say is also, so you don't compromise your study, that if you, during term time, you shouldn't really be doing any more than 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I think that falls in line with the campus jobs
as
well.
Exactly what I was going to say.
See, we're all tied together, which is really important. And so that's the recommended sort of time during term time. Vacation, it is completely up to you.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I know that when you get to third year, there can be this sudden, oh my God, I've not got enough on my CV. I haven't done a placement.
Yeah.
I must do an internship. And whilst obviously it's great knowing that they do it term time, if you're a final year, I think it's really important to think ahead and think, even if I'm doing 20 hours, is that going to be too much? Where is it that they want you to be located in?
Yes.
Those, I think, are really important things from a student perspective, that if I were to put myself in those shoes, I think that that would essentially, maybe that's something I'd crumble at, do you know what I mean? But I think definitely keeping in mind your Easter holiday or summer holiday, we had quite a few breaks where you could turn something around.
Definitely, and do remember, I mean, you know, if you're a final year student and you haven't yet got any kind of work experience in a way that you feel confident about, then, you know, you finish your exams relatively early compared to everyone else, and that does give you the freedom to go and try things out before you actually, you know, a few weeks later you'll graduate, but you know, it's never too late to do anything, and it's never too early to do anything, so you've got to do what's right for you.
Kind of adding to that, what would you say are the main benefits to a student who's done, let's say, a placement compared to someone who hasn't done a placement?
So you learn so much more about yourself outside of the classroom. You learn about your ability to work in a team. You learn about, you know, what you are at work and what you are, you know, within the context of a working environment. So you learn, you know, are you a creator? Are you a shaper? Are you a leader? Are you a bit of all of that? Do you enjoy attention to detail? Are you a project manager? You know, all those things come to life when you're at work because, you know, you step into a role and you build that confidence in who you are that you don't necessarily do as much at university. Of course you do, through group work and presentations and projects and things like that, but you're putting it into a real world of work context, and I think that will help you decide whether the work experience sector that you've moved into is actually for you when you graduate. So another thing that you can learn is everything you've thought about in terms of what you wanted to do. Say you decide, they say actually that your career choices start when you're around 7 years old. Did you know that?
I mean, I think when I was 7, I wanted to work in Clark's because I thought that they would, like, I wondered where they disappeared to. So, I mean, that says a lot about me, but
Clark's the shoe shop.
Or a waitress.
And
I did become one. So, you know, dreams can come true, everybody.
Absolutely. So, no, the interesting thing is, they say our career choices start at a very early age, and that exploration that we do through part-time working and through placements is absolutely vital, and we learn about what we're interested in and our aspirations and whether that fits the actual labour market. So a lot of young people are interested in sort of media sector and music and sport and those sorts of exciting things they have great exposure to, but as you kind of grow in your experience, you learn all about all these different things that you do and what you need to do to get there, whether they be educationally, professionally and experientially. So all those things come together when you're doing a placement, as well as making the connections as well.
So it's really like your first time to properly test those interests that you think you might have, or strengths that you think you have.
And we have students actually who don't enjoy their experience.
Yeah, that's what we'll get onto a little bit later with that. I think
I'll leave that for them, but that's just as important.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all about the learning curve and the challenges necessarily making it more interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on to actually how to find a placement.
Yeah.
Just a kind of basic question. Where would the average student start looking for their placement?
Okay, so the average student at the University of Reading, if there's such a thing.
There's quite a variety, isn't there?
Absolutely. So we do have My Jobs Online, which everybody is enrolled on. What you would do is set your preferences to say what sectors you're interested in and the types of areas. So for example, we set it to year-long placements, internship length, long summer, or graduate when you're graduate vacancies when you're looking for a graduate job. So you would set it to the level you're interested in and also the sectors that you have an interest in. And when vacancies come in, you'll receive bulletins. So it's a bit of a no-brainer to set that because you'll get regular alerts from organisations and employers that target the University of Reading.
I was just going to say to that, I'll get on to what my placement experience was like shortly, but I know that part of the recruitment process, we were thinking, okay, we want to reach out to X, Y and Z university. And we actually got in contact, I believe, with our careers team, who then put it on that bulletin.
That's correct.
To say, to showcase it to students.
Yes, that's right. So My Jobs Online is a really rich ground of where you would be looking for an opportunity in the first instance. But then there are really great organisations out there like Rate My Placement.
Yeah, that's so useful.
That's fantastic, and that's quite a kind of all-encompassing organisation that has very broad spectrum opportunities, but also very specific. And again, it's very similar to My Jobs Online in setting preferences. And then also you've got Grad Cracker, which is really for your STEM students who might be looking for more scientific opportunities. You've got Total Jobs. There's so many of them. To get looking out there. Monster Jobs, Indeed, you know, there are so many different types of opportunities on there online. And of course, my biggest sort of piece of advice is think about your top 10 companies that you're interested in and look at their careers pages to see what opportunities are there too. And LinkedIn is the best place.
I am such an advocate for LinkedIn as well.
If you haven't got a LinkedIn profile, you need
make one after this podcast. It's really not as hard as you might think it would be. And you don't have to have it as like an advanced level straight away. It can be something that over your placement you can develop it. When you might have jobs that are on LinkedIn for your placement, and you can use that opportunity to just develop, follow people up from the organisation. I think I should be an ambassador for them.
I'm sure they'd have you in a heartbeat. I mean, the good thing about LinkedIn, my piece of advice to any student is the amount of time you spend on Instagram, or Snapchat, or Facebook, or TikTok, any of those, all of those. Just think, right, for 4 weeks, I'm going to spend half the time building my LinkedIn and get the app. Yeah. And it becomes quite addictive.
It does. It really does. Especially when, you might have to start off following some people that I wouldn't say ever follow completely random people, but you might, sometimes it might be a bit of a stretch when you're building your network. Like they go to University of Reading, they're in Henley Business School. I don't know them, but I kind of know that region. You might want to start doing that because you never know, when you come back from your placement, you might network with that person. But I definitely think I agree with that. I think just spending some time on it.
It's an investment really worth considering. Make sure you've got a really nice photo though. It doesn't have to be professional, but you're more likely to have your profile looked at. It's really good as well, not just for looking for opportunities. So if you follow the companies you're interested in and the Reading alumni group, you'll be able to see from your course people who've graduated and the kind of roles they're into now. So what they're doing. LinkedIn also obviously follows, so you're on LinkedIn and it stays with you wherever you move on to, so you're able to keep in touch with people and see where their career trajectory goes. And what I would do is I would look at the LinkedIn profile of say a grad from your course and look at the skills, and you'll have some of those skills. Make sure that you're using their blueprint really to help inform your own LinkedIn profile. Honestly, it's so addictive. addictive. It's brilliant.
I would also, to add to that, say when you're on your placement, if you've managed to get your LinkedIn set up and at a level that you're happy with, near the end of the year, or even just at a point where you feel comfortable and confident, like ask your team if they can reinforce your skills, or what they call it, endorse your skills, or if they can, you know, give you a recommendation. They might do that off of their own back, but it's always worth having those conversations to really strengthen your profile. And it is a virtual CV, and I do think it's potentially what we're going to start moving to over CVs.
Well, they'd say it's your CV that never sleeps.
Yeah, exactly.
Cheesy,
everyone can see it.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. You want everyone to be able to see it so that you're constantly marketing yourself, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with that, and I've also written down Reading alumni because I'm going to follow them after I finish things.
Brilliant.
So I think, the last question that I had actually, I thought of when you were talking about the STEM subjects and also psychology placements. How would you expect? What subjects would you expect to be paid versus not paid? What should a student expect?
Okay, so I think it's a really difficult one because you could be a psychologist and be paid for your placement.
Right.
So it's about the sector you move into. So if you're going into a sort of charitable sector, say you're a biological sciences student and you're going into doing sort of a research-based role, or zoology or animal science, you know, in APD, you know, quite often those placements are likely to be low paid or unpaid, and actually that's quite traditional. It might not necessarily feel right to you, and we're trying to shift the balance on this. We do have a bursary for students who have a household income of $45,000 or less. If you're a home or an EU student, you can apply for this. And basically, you can get up to £1,000 per academic year to support you. Of course, £1,000 for a whole year isn't much.
You can also get your student loan during your placement year, but a reduced fee.
A reduced fee, and only in some exceptional circumstances if you're doing sort of unpaid service.
Okay.
So it's really difficult. I will say you really have to go in with your eyes wide open, because if you can't finish your placement because of your financial situation, and we don't want you incurring debt either. Yes, you'll be rich in terms of the knowledge you develop and experience, but becoming more in debt is very stressful.
Yeah.
And I would heavily advocate that you speak to student finance team if you are considering doing unpaid placement.
So would you suggest then maybe looking at the placements around your area, maybe that
closer
commutable?
to home.
Yeah.
If you're going to do an unpaid placement because of the nature of the work, I definitely think if you can live closer to home, if you've got the means to do that, and the support network around you, that might be a sensible solution.
But it sounds like the university offer a place where you can kind of go and they can give you that initial advice.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Is this going to be feasible for you, or maybe should you look in a different
we
way?
do. We've got placement coordinators, so it's really important. Look on Student Essentials under the careers section, and we have the list of all our lovely placement coordinators who are there. They're highly trained, very experienced in supporting students, whatever type of placements they're considering going into, and we can really help with all the different levels that you need to think about: location, you know, finance, all those sorts of things.
Okay. So basically there's an option for all students to really investigate that and look into it and just get the information that they need before they even start looking if they want to. Okay, so I want to kind of give an overview of my placement experience, and I think that will lead to some interesting questions that I have for Em to answer me about how maybe somebody else in a similar position could do something different, or advice that she could give to that. So I worked at HP, which was formerly known as Hewlett-Packard. You might know them for selling printers and computers. And I worked as a communications intern for EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East and Africa. And my role essentially was aiding the communications team by producing internal newsletters, working alongside the media as it was PR or communications. I was lucky enough to attend some quite cool launch events, and also I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn as I worked on what we call a corporate profile for the MD of UAE. So I produced content for him to basically make sure that his engagement was at an optimum level, and I was able to actually build it up over the year. I also had the opportunity within my role to get involved with charity, as HP were associated with a charity called the Prince's Trust, and we were set a target to raise £20,000. So we had to do all sorts to do that. I was running through mud, I was packing bags, I was standing outside football stadiums with those like jingly things that you have to collect money in. And there was also a big cohort of interns. So there was 26 of us that had to try and do that. I also had a counterpart intern on my team as well. So there was 2 of us within a communications team. And I would say that's a kind of shortened version of my placement, but I'd say the best things that I gained from that was I gained a lot of confidence, especially I'm already, I'd say, quite a good communicator. I talk a lot, but I definitely gained communication skills in terms of like making sure that I was concise with what I was saying. I feel like it made me a little bit more corporate, I guess, and develop my networking skills. Especially my manager at the end of it called it soft skills. She said that it helped to develop my soft skills in terms of, I guess, the tools that you need in a workplace to kind of get the stuff done and just kind of really find your feet. I was able to apply some of the skills that I learned in my degree. I think initially I was a bit worried about this because I thought, oh my God, I've not got a very good memory. How am I going to apply like this module and this module and this module? But what I think this can probably be said universally across courses. You'll do it naturally, and you'll do it in ways that in a way it's more useful because they're going to be more repeatable in the workplace.
Absolutely.
It's all well and good writing an essay, but those kind of core skills and core things you learn about, you'll just naturally apply. So that was really good. I had some really insightful opportunities, like I mentioned, the product launches and different events. Like there's something called the Tech Talent Charter, which was really cool. It was in the Gherkin, and I had to wake up very early, but I got to work there, and it was about supporting like women in tech. So that was really cool to work with a company that like had that ethos where they were trying to support women and everything like that, and work towards diversity and increasing that. So I was really lucky to do that. So though I'd say they were like kind of the main, I had loads of benefits, but they were like the main ones I think that kind of stuck out to me. But also I think my placement experience for me is quite interesting because there were some challenges that I had to overcome over the course. It was 13 months long, so it was quite a long time. A lot of things happened which I had to kind of grow from them and stuff. So I wanted to talk through those with you. I guess the first thing was that as I had a counterpart intern, as I mentioned, it meant that we got to work collaboratively on certain things, which was great. But it also meant that it was quite difficult to stand out as one. So one thing that I wondered what your advice was is how to get recognition in that situation, or just generally, as there were 26 other interns, and there was prizes like intern of the quarter and things like that. So it's like, if you really want to get that, what's your best advice on showing and standing out?
Okay, so I think it's knowing who you are and looking at what your unique selling point is. We all hear this word USP in business and all sorts of places, and actually, you know, you've got to think about your brand, your professional brand, you as a person, what you bring to the organisation. That could be a variety of ways. So it does fall down to your place. So for example, if you are a shaper or a leader or anything really, you don't have to be the one that's shouting the loudest all the time about your great ideas. You can be the person who brings things together. You're the glue of the team, you know, you could be community spirited. And I think it's making sure that you're regularly reminding your line manager of your accomplishments in a really sort of genuine way, but also making sure that you're representing the team at the same time. But there's no harm in blowing your own trumpet. I think it's so important to remind people of the things that you can do and what you can bring.
I think that's really interesting because I know that personally I found when I was in that big group and we'd have big group meetings, I wasn't necessarily the loudest. Because it was quite scary when you've got all these different personalities around you. You just end up kind of going in on yourself.
You do.
But that leads quite well to our next point, how you said about the line manager. So as I had an EMEA team, they were quite... they were distributed quite widely. But then also I had a line manager, but it was actually very like dotted in terms of I couldn't really tell you who my set manager was. I had a daily supervisor, I had someone who was in the beginning as my supervisor, I had different people that I would send different reports to. My line manager was kind of the top dog of the EMEA team. So not only was there that, but also the team was never fixed. It was, we would always hot desk. I never had a permanent desk. And the team would be, you know, I might see them once a week, I might see them twice a week. There wasn't an awful lot of communication face to face. Which meant that it was hard to build rapport and really feel comfortable at times, because you never felt like you'd get so far and then you might kind of take a step back because you might not see them for a while, you might not work with them. And what would your advice be on that in terms of making the most of that?
So I would say that sounds to me very much like the modern way of working. So it's the matrix kind of way of working, where you've got lots of different kind of leadership and peers, and it's an interesting structure, but it's becoming more and more common now, in business in particular. My advice, if you've got a structure like that can feel a little unsettling, if you're used to hierarchies at university, it can be, you know, like that really, in terms of you've got your, you know, academic tutors and specific tutors, and you've got this kind of, you follow the rules, mostly. But in terms of that, I'd find your hive. So find people that you work well with, that you relate to, and keep them close to you. But be very clear with working out what the hierarchy really looks like. So that could mean sitting down with your HR department and just asking them to be really clear with lines of responsibility, and where those lines are blurred, what the expectations are. And you might need to sort of reassess that on a regular level, but make sure that you're checking in with someone almost pastorally on a weekly level, because it can be stressful, and that can affect your mental well-being and your stress levels if you've got all this unclarity and uncertainty.
I did have a few moments within my team where, minus obviously my peer, who I was lucky enough to be like very good friends with, I didn't really know who to turn to pastorally, I guess. And there were certain times where I didn't know whether to turn to the person who run the internship scheme, or whether that was a bit too far, or certain things, which I'll go on to the next point. But I was lucky enough that the structure of the placement meant that we had an internal mentor within our team, and then we had an external mentor within the company, and that would be someone who's not in the same department as you. So I had a guy called James who worked in kind of the sales of like commercial things, completely different to me. But not only did that mean I had the opportunity to learn about something different, but also he wasn't that much older than me, but he was a really good kind of soundboard, giving strong advice. He'd been there not that long ago. And if you have the opportunity, even if it's not necessarily a structure, if you have the opportunity to reach out to someone that maybe you've had a coffee with and you got on well with, just send them a message, because they're probably more than likely to be open to talk to you about those experiences.
Peer support, isn't it?
That's
what it's
about.
And we've got schemes that you can look into that internally before you even go. So you've got Thrive, where you can get a career mentor to help you before
your placement.
Well, you can use your, if you have a Thrive, so second year is the time that you can secure a career mentor. So it could be an alumni of the University of Reading, who's done your course before, or it could be one of our sort of well-known partners, employer partners, and you can use them as a sounding board. But if you look at peer support, it's so valuable, because it's somebody you build a relationship, might be like-minded, and can help you. Obviously keep it as professional as you can. Anything that feels a bit sticky or HR related, try it and make sure that you are speaking to the right people. But there's no harm in just using people as a sounding board, professional ideas, and that's really healthy.
He really helped certain things that I would so I had PDRs every week. I can't remember what they sound.
Professional development reviews.
So there was sometimes, I'll be honest, there was sometimes where things would come up in them where I think everyone has that, where they would say, oh, maybe you could do this, or you could do this, or we've noticed this. And sometimes I would feel quite frustrated and think, I don't know, I didn't think I was doing this, or I don't know how to proceed. And I would go and speak to him about it, and he would be such a good help in that. And it was relaxing for me to know, and I was comforted to know that he wasn't gonna go and tell my team everything I said. It was confidential. Whereas if I maybe gone to someone in my team, they're a team, so they might have conversed about that. So that was a bit more nerve-wracking. Something that I wanted to talk to you, which was, I guess, a HR issue. I wasn't sure whether to reach out. I moved to London for my role, as it was when I signed the contract. It was in London.
Yes.
As the year went on, we would then do 1 day in Bracknell, 4 days in London, 1 day in Bracknell, and that meant commuting. But it was okay because it was 1 day. They'd expense my train fare. That was fine. I started in July, and by December, they actually informed us. They sat us down and they said, the Wood Street office in London has become overpopulated and you're going to have to come to Bracknell more often. And this was really difficult for me because it went from being in London 4 days a week to being in Bracknell, I think it was 3 days a week, which doesn't sound too much, but it was difficult because it was about 2-hour commute each way, and I'd moved to London. I was paying rent in London, and I really didn't know what to do in that situation. I had to learn to be resilient. I had a week where I was a bit like, this is so annoying, and then I just thought, right, it's not going to change, just get used to it. And eventually we were allowed to work from home. But I just wondered what your advice would be in that situation.
Well, it sounds to me like you handled it really well, because absolutely, because you are entering the world of work where anything is possible. Obviously, your contract stipulates one thing, and I'm not an employment lawyer, so I can't really advise on contracts. But I think you're perfectly within your rights to speak to your HR department if anything changes within your contract, including your location, to have a discussion to see what is reasonable. Also, what's reasonable for them to help you with in terms of cost to you that you wouldn't have incurred otherwise. And that is really vital. Now, you said you might have incurred some travel expenses.
Yeah, but also still, I wouldn't have moved to London had I known it was going to be in Bracknell.
Exactly that, and we do have that happening on occasion. And I would always say the first place to start is your HR department. If you feel you're not getting anywhere and you're not happy, I think it's reasonable to say, if it's really going to be a complex situation for you to resolve, you might want to come and talk to your placement coordinator or indeed the welfare team at the university. Get outside advice on how you could manage the situation. It's a contractual one, so really that discussion needs to start with the HR team. You can speak to your HR team in confidence outside of your line management as well, so do remember that. I think you've always got to think about what's practical, reasonable, and have an open discussion.
I mean, I knew ultimately that I was going to come out of it and I was going to be a bit more like, okay, if that would happen again, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I think at the time it just felt like the rug had been pulled a little bit.
It did.
But that's really helpful to know. I think if I was to happen that again, I didn't think to reach out to HR, but that's really interesting. So I guess my last kind of question from my experience is, there were definitely a lot of positives in my experience and I learned so much, but also there were some challenges. And let's say hypothetically, if it was worse, what would your advice be if someone came up for their placement and said, I just really didn't enjoy that, or that really wasn't for me, and now I've realised that's not where I want to go into, I feel like I've wasted my time. Maybe not that strong, because I think that's about perspective, but do you know what I mean? What would your advice be to that?
I would say that, okay, so there's two things you could look at. So say you were feeling like that during your placement and you really felt it was insurmountable and you didn't want to continue because you were very deeply unhappy. Please come and talk to the university. You can talk to your placement tutor, or you can talk to your placement coordinator or the welfare team, because the one thing we don't want to happen is for you to suffer through feeling under pressure to do something that you're really not enjoying, because you're not going to get the best out of the experience. If you do make it through to the end and feel that way, then you can never take away the experience that you've had. So look at all the things that you can carry forward outside of the context of maybe the things you don't enjoy as much. So say you've gone into an environment where you thought you were going to do more marketing and you ended up doing more admin. Think about all the plus points. So you've probably learned more about Excel than you ever knew you'd ever learn, and actually that's a skill that everybody needs today. Customer service, how to engage in sort of meetings, running meetings, project management. Pick all the things out, and also you're not going to waste time looking for a job in that sector when you graduate, you're going to eliminate. It's a process of elimination.
Right. So you can tick that one off the list in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And nobody knows but you how you feel. So when you go into the next interview for your graduate job, for example, you don't have to say, well, I didn't enjoy it. You could say, this is what I gained. It wasn't the career for me, but this is what I gained, and be positive.
And really, I feel like if you demonstrate that as well,
Yes.
then they might already know. If you've gone into a job that's accounting and your experience is marketing, they might already be able to pick up that maybe you decided that wasn't your route. But I think that they'll be more impressed maybe by your interpretation of it. And if
absolutely.
You can demonstrate
and
that.
I think positivity is always key, because I think, I'm not saying be Pollyanna and constantly positive, but I think there's a way to be really sort of mature about experience. And absolutely that.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I thought we'd kind of do some general Q&A questions, some of the ones that have come up from Instagram. Because our followers are very interactive these days.
It was lovely to see those. I felt really wanted.
So the first one, which also I thought would be a good question to pose, is about international placements. So how hard is it to work overseas? Is it possible? What's the process like? What's kind of your advice on that?
So many of our students do go abroad for their placement year, or indeed for shorter placements. So I would say we do get a lot of organisations coming to the University of Reading offering opportunities. If you're going to Europe, for example, for a placement, we get plenty of students going there that, they have a salary to go and do their placement overseas. You can also do it as part of Erasmus Plus presently. I mean, things may change there in the future, but at the moment that's a possibility, and get some extra funding. We've also got a really good resource called Going Global, and that's wonderful because you can choose your sort of area that you're interested in and look at some of the key opportunities and vacancies within those countries. You might be a home student, an EU student, or an international student just wanting to spread your wings, so you certainly get lots of support to point you in the right direction. The only limitation you've potentially got are visa restrictions. So those are things that our international advisory team can help with. So there may be countries, particularly America and Canada, that you need a specific visa for to work, and obviously the employer has to sponsor you. You don't have the automatic rights to work in those countries. So we often, work with organisations and some agencies where they can pull everything together for you and give you the right advice.
So if you're considering somewhere that's further than Europe, it's worth really having that discussion to start off with.
For
seeing
sure,
if it's
looking what's feasible. It's but not also thinking I can't do this. Everything is possible. It's just making sure that you've got the right tools for it, really.
Okay, so another question that we had was, do A-levels matter when applying for placements?
So it can in some sectors. So for example, finance and accountancy, they sometimes do look at your A-level scores, because it's important that you achieved a certain tariff in order to access their way of working. I think a lot of companies are dropping this now. So the Big Four used to certainly look at that. I think it's rare now. I think they're more likely to look at what you are on for in terms of your degree classifications. So some organisations will stipulate they want you to be on for a 2-1, and that again is because of the attainment and the expected level of working. But I think a lot of recruiters now are being more diverse-minded. They're more interested in the actual talent, the competencies, and the actual tests that they do. So, psychometric tests. You'll have all sorts of different tests that will screen you, that don't rely on your prior education. And I think that's the way that recruitment is heading, and has been for some time.
I think as well, work experience to any degree is probably equally as valuable, not maybe slightly more in some instances in A-levels. I know that when I kind of asked, a bit cheeky, but I said, why did you hire me? And they did mention my work experience and stuff, and I don't think you necessarily have to have a really extensive range, but even you might think having a part-time job in your local post office or whatever is going to be not add much value to your CV, but I think it's the transferable skills that they're really looking for that you can make shine.
Definitely. So if you've done the Red Award, or if you've done volunteering, if you've been in a club or society, any of those things really add value to your CV and your confidence. It gives you more to say than I'm studying law or I'm studying, a specific degree subject. It gives you more context to questions you're asked about your strengths. And the thing I think a lot of students really struggle with is the question that everybody gets asked to interview: tell me about yourself.
Yeah, okay, because you want to be unique.
Yeah.
You don't want to sound too generic.
No.
And even on your cover letter, actually, I was involved in little bits of the recruitment process for our next interns. And
Excellent.
I got to read the cover letters and the CVs, and also got to watch my supervisors do it and see what their approach was. And I think we really wanted to get to know people through their cover letters and like the ones that sounded the most unique but not too showy or not too just like I didn't realise it's easy to overdo it.
Yeah, it really is.
And then they'll pick it up and they'll go, no, put it in the no pile, and you're like, oh, savage. But,
it's fine balance, isn't it? It's a real fine balance. I've heard, actually, recruitment consultants say that your cover letter is a love letter. You basically want to convince the organisation that you're the right fit, but don't go over the top, because it just puts people right off. You need to be using evidence of why you're suitable. Don't just say, what they're expecting you to say. Say a bit more. So tell them why you have the skills that you have. Give some examples. You're probably all aware of the STAR technique. So for competency-based in interviews, questions, they want to know that you're competent in the areas they really want you to be good at. So you need to give evidence for why you are, able to follow through with those specifics. So I think it's really, really important to think before you write those letters about what kind of example sets you aside.
Okay, so our final question, I think we've already touched on it, is does university help when applying for placements outside of the Reading/London area?
Of course we do. The majority of our students will be doing their placements outside of the southeast, and we support with everything. The thing is, we often talk about location. So many Reading students aren't from the area, and they may wish to be closer to home to do their placements for economical reasons, but also to be close to family and relatives and the support base. And I think the world is your oyster, and we have placement providers and employers all over the world, all over the UK and nationally. And of course we support you really to achieve your goals and ambitions wherever that might be.
So it's really there's no limit in terms of, it's more so being motivated to really think about what you want to do, and then using the resources to answer those major questions that you might have in terms of support and whether it's feasible or not.
Exactly, and I think it's really important. If you decide geographically you are locked down to a specific area, you're going to have to restrict your search, and that might limit your options. But you have to think really carefully, because location is just as important as the sector you're interested in many respects. For example, although I'm placement manager for the university, I also look after food and nutritional science students, and they're sort of the specific area I'm responsible for as a subject, and a lot of those vacancies are Midlands, because that's where a lot of our food companies are. And it's really, really interesting, because if a student doesn't want to work in the Midlands,
so you've got to keep an open mind to an extent.
But to be fair, there are plenty of food organisations all over the world, but we just notice there's an awful lot in the Midlands, so it's really, really interesting.
Okay, so I think that's probably about all we've got time for today. We've covered quite a lot, I think.
Yes.
But if you have any more questions, and if you're listening to this, you've got any kind of burning questions that we haven't covered, feel free to either leave them in the comments or message Campus Jobs, and I'm sure we can get round to answering those for you as well. But thank you so much, Em, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been
You've
great.
given some really, really useful advice that I'll probably even be listening to this back and being like, oh, she said that. But thank you so much for joining, and I think Caitlin is going to be on the next podcast, which is about making the most of your degree, as she was talking to a PhD student, Chris, who actually also works with us. So yeah, tune in for that. But hopefully you've enjoyed this, and please leave any feedback below.
Yay.